Loveridge with the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, and I'm pleased to be your moderator and host for today's webinar on anaerobic digesters. We have two presenters today, Charles Gould and Benjamin Bailey. Charles is an extension educator focusing on bioenergy and energy conservation with the Agriculture and Agribusiness Institute. And Benjamin Bailey is a student both at Michigan State University. And with that, I'm just going to turn it right over to Charles because we're keeping these things snappy.
Well, thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it, and I am delighted that you folks have joined us here today. We've got some great information that we're very eager to share with you, and hope that this next 60 minutes is going to be of benefit to you. We would just invite you to put your comments in the chat box, questions in the chat box, and as Scott said, he will moderate this. As you can see on the slide there, the title of this project was Improved Information Transfer to Assist Farmers in Rural Michigan and Wisconsin in Making Informed Decisions about On-Farm Small-Scale Anaerobic Digesters. I want to point out before we get going here that funding for this project was made possible through a grant from the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, and we appreciated their financial support. There we go. Wanted to recognize the project team. There's myself and Dr. Vance Haugen from the University of Wisconsin Extension, Dr. Dana Kirk from Michigan State University, Dr. Becky Larson from the University of Wisconsin Extension, Dr. Jonathan Riven from the University of Wisconsin Extension, and then of course Ben Bailey, who's an undergraduate in the MSU Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering, whom you will hear in just a few minutes. Now, what I'd like to do is provide some background into the genesis of this project. And it sounds like we're having some audio issues. Is everybody else having those same issues?
I'm hearing you fine.
Okay. Well, I'm going to continue on here. Okay, that's good. So dairy farming has long been a stronghold of Wisconsin and Michigan agriculture and of rural communities in both states. At 22% of 2008 farm gate receipts, dairy is the largest single agricultural commodity in Michigan. In Wisconsin, milk and other dairy products from cows represent 51% of the total market value of agricultural products sold in Wisconsin. The average dairy herd size in Wisconsin and Michigan is 107 and 130 cows respectively. In Michigan, 86% of all the dairies milk less than 200 cows, while in Wisconsin, 92% of all dairies milk less than 200 cows. However, the future for small and mid-sized dairy farms is uncertain. While milk production in these states has remained relatively constant, the number of small and mid-sized dairy farms has declined. This has significant implications for the diversity of both states' dairy industry and the overall vitality of rural communities. Farmers with small dairy herds want to continue to farm and are actively seeking ways to reduce expenses and increase farm income. Dairy farms are energy intensive, and reducing or eliminating energy costs can increase farm profitability. Some dairy farmers in Michigan report that at least 10 to 15% of their gross revenue goes toward paying their energy bills. So consequently, many farmers are investigating the possibility of installing anaerobic digesters on their farm as a way to generate electricity to become more energy independent and offset costs or diversify revenue streams. The potential for malodor reduction, improved availability of plant nutrients in the digestate, and value-added products in the fiber are very attractive benefits. However, more information is needed than is currently available to assist them in making the best economic decisions about on-farm digesters. The need for more information was made very clear in the survey results of participants in a November 2011 Small Digester Conference sponsored by the University of Wisconsin-Madison, University of Wisconsin Extension, and Michigan State University Extension. The purposes of the conference were to provide dairy farmers with a basic understanding of anaerobic digestion, highlight the key issues facing small digester adoption, and present options for the small-scale farmer. There were 61 attendees from 3 Midwestern states. Half the conference participants were dairy farmers with an average herd size of around 200 cows, while the remainder were comprised of consultants, educators, and government agencies. A survey was conducted at the conclusion of the conference, and attendees were asked to list the topics they would most like to see offered at a future anaerobic digester conference or training program. Half of the responses to this question were related to the need for more information on the economics of installing, operating, and maintaining a small digester. Some of that information is known, but it's in a fragmented form and needs to be collected and synthesized to be useful. Rural communities in Michigan and Wisconsin depend on dairy farms for tax revenues. Dairies create a ripple effect when both the agricultural economy and the economic well-being of rural America. When a dairy farmer spends money locally, it creates a multiplier effect of more than 2.5 times the original dollar spent. Keeping dairy farms financially solvent is paramount to maintaining the economic viability of rural communities. One way to keep small digesters in business is to help them reduce their energy expenses through anaerobic digestion. Small dairy farmers are interested in anaerobic digestion, but they lack the knowledge on the economics installing and operating and maintaining small digesters. The long-term outcome of this project is to increase the economic prosperity of rural communities through renewable energy development. Achieving this goal requires some intermediate knowledge transfer steps. This grant proposes to support knowledge transfer steps by pulling together all that is known about the economics of installing, operating, and maintaining a small digester. This has been done through the development of 1 peer-reviewed literature review, 5 peer-reviewed case studies of small dairies with digesters, 1 peer-reviewed e-extension article, and 1 small digester design, and then some pending grant proposals to answer questions resulting from this project. This morning we
Thank you, Charles.
3 of those outcomes.
I'm looking for the PowerPoint, and I don't really see it to be dragged over. Rosa, do you happen to have access to the PowerPoint right now?
His literature review, and I'll present the findings of the case study and review the digester design. So Ben, the time is now yours.
No, I still really don't see the PowerPoint. Rosa,
Ben,
do you possibly have the PowerPoint? Are you able to set it up?
These are examples of what's currently on the website. There'll be 3 more case studies that are posted.
Thank you very
in
much.
addition to what you see right there.
Well, hello everybody. Ooh. My name is Ben Bailey. I am an undergraduate biosystems engineering student at Michigan State University. First off, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this webinar. We hope that you find the information presented today relevant and useful for your future plans. I am here today to present the process behind and findings of a literature review that I conducted over the past year. This review focuses on the implementation and installation of anaerobic digesters on small farms in the Midwest area of the United States. The purpose of this literature review was to breach knowledge gaps between farmers and anaerobic digesters. Although some research has been done on anaerobic digestion in the past, there has been no full circle literature review previous that encompasses all aspects of the economic installation of anaerobic digesters. And, as we saw earlier, farmers are very interested in learning about digester technology. This review seeks to bring together this spaced out information and provide answers to some of today's most pressing questions. Overall, this review is an integral part of a larger research development in which 3 case studies were conducted and documented on small-scale digester projects. Altogether, these pieces of research are being used to collect data, background knowledge, and ideas in order to gain funding and build and test an economically viable digester on a small farm. Research like this is important because, as you can see from this figure, currently small dairies make up over 87% of dairy farms today. Many of these dairies are interested in adopting anaerobic digester technology on their farms. However, they don't possess any knowledge on the economics or policy behind installing one. When I'm talking about a small dairy in this presentation, I am focusing on farms of less than 200 head. This is because the current average herd size in the United States is 187 head per farm. Also, if I ever say small-scale digester, I am merely referring to a digester which operates on a small dairy. Currently, there are 171 separate digesters in the United States. Of these 171, Michigan has 6 on-farm digesters, all of which are located on confined animal feeding operations. Wisconsin has 29 on-farm digesters, and all but one of these digesters are located on confined animal feeding operations. Compared to other countries, the United States has far less digesters. As of 2009, there were almost 50 million small-scale digesters operating around the world. Also, as of 2009, there were an estimated 37 million small-scale digesters operating in China alone. I will now go into the data analysis and discussion portion of the review and talk about some of the results. Overall, there are many incentives to farms who want to install anaerobic digesters. These incentives are increased income, plant available nutrients, state policies, flexibility of digester systems, and odor control. The first positive to anaerobic digester implementation is increased income. Digesters grant farmers increased income while still outputting great products. In a study conducted by Lansing and Cleveland, it was found that small-scale digesters produce over $5,000 of revenue annually from biogas production. This income is comprised from many sources, such as electrical generation and sales, the use of methane for heating, the sale of compost and bedding, carbon credits, and tipping fees. Another aspect of digestion that is often overlooked is the production of digestate as a byproduct. Digestate is what is left over from feedstocks when the digestive process is complete. This material has extremely high nutrient value that is nearly identical to manure. This means that it can be used effectively as a fertilizer, allowing farmers who would regularly use their manure as a fertilizer to follow the same practices but also gain the bonus income from digester technology. In addition to the nutrient values portrayed by digestate, it is also almost odorless. Anaerobic digestion destroys about 60 to 75% of the volatile solids found within untreated manure. These volatile solids are what gives manure its smell when land applied. Also, the roof over digesters eliminates almost all of the smells emanating from the natural degradation of manure. State and governments also offer many incentives for digester installation. In Wisconsin, the Renewable Energy Sales Tax Exemption offers sales tax exemptions to all sales made by clean energy systems. Also, the Renewable Energy Grant Program offers grants for a variety of renewable energy systems, including anaerobic digesters. The minimum and maximum digester awards from this grant are $5,000 and $500,000 respectively. This award at its maximum is enough to cover half of the capital cost, including electrical generation equipment, of a plug flow digester servicing a farm of about 500 head. In Michigan, the biomass gasification and methane digester property tax exemption offers farmers who are certified digester operators to have registered digesters on their property 100% tax exemption from real and personal property taxes. Also, the state offers a biomass energy program grants for the adoption of anaerobic digesters. These grants average around $25,000. Michigan's Renewable Portfolio Standard mandates the utilities generate 10% of their retail electricity sales from renewable energy sources by 2015. Another benefit for anaerobic digesters is that digesters are not limited to treating a single type of waste. Digesters are actually often more efficient when a combination of organic feedstocks are added along with manure. As feedstocks such as food waste are added, biogas output increases, which leads to more possible revenue for a digester system. An example of this is located at Michigan State University. Michigan State University recently built a digester that accepts food waste from on-campus cafeterias and mixes it with manure from the Michigan State University dairy farm. This digester continues to refine its methane output using different types of feedstocks. Digesters can also exist in many forms, as seen above. These forms may look very different in practice, but ultimately they all perform the same goals. With so many positives to anaerobic digester technology adoption, it is odd that there are so few digesters operating in the United States. Why is this? Well, I will now describe many barriers to anaerobic digestion and why it is not applicable in the United States. First off, we have dairy farm consolidation trends. Basically what this means is that the number of dairy herds in the United States has dropped from approximately 150,000 in 1990 to its current level of 58,000 in 2011. This is a trend that will continue as the dairy industry consolidates into larger farms, leading to fewer opportunities for the implementation of small-scale digesters in the future. Another huge barrier to anaerobic digester adoption is that farmers have their own views of digestion. In a survey conducted by Wilkerson, it was found that 45% of farmers were disinclined to adopt digesters. Farmers also believe that digesters actually burn carbon when methane is produced and release this into the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas. In reality, the combustion of methane by digesters actually keeps carbon out of the atmosphere, which is why, as a source of income for digesters, you can sell and purchase carbon credits. Although state policies help anaerobic digester technology, it also hurts it. In Michigan and Wisconsin, the mandate to have 10% of utilities resale electricity sales from renewable energy has been met. This means that it will be less likely to obtain funding for anaerobic digesters in the future. Also, many permits exist that make it difficult for farmers to install anaerobic digesters. In Michigan, if biogas is not being pumped off-site, operators will be required to obtain an air permit. Also, a water quality permit, a soil erosion permit, and a solid waste permit may be required if the digester is receiving feedstocks other than manure. This is especially true if the digester is being used to treat pre- or post-consumer food waste. Also, farmers may be required to obtain a permit for land application of digestate if the substances going into the digester are different than manure. In Wisconsin, permits are required no matter how much sulfur dioxide is released into the atmosphere due to odor regulations. No malodorous gases may be released from a system without a permit. Different digesters are allowed to emit different amounts of sulfur dioxide based on their size and by their feedstock composition. Other than this, most digesters are not required to have a permit unless a generator is connected to the system and combustion is occurring. The high cost of digester implementation is probably the largest detriment to wide-range digester adoption today. The smallest digesters often cost around $1 million. This price would be extremely difficult for any small farmer to meet, especially since the usual payback time for a digester is predicted to be around 20 years. From this image, you can see that as the number of head increases on a farm, the price goes up. Ultimately, you might think that this is a good thing for small farmers, but in fact it is not. With some simple arithmetic, we can see here that the actual price using numbers taken off this AgStar chart of implementing a digester system per head is actually much higher for a smaller farm. This leads to a huge dilemma for small farmers. Digester technology is supposed to be scalable, but we can see here that it is clearly not yet economically scalable. Within the natural gas, while the natural gas market can aid digester implementation, it can also discourage it. This is because natural gas prices are not fixed. When natural gas prices are high, the value of biogas increases. When natural gas prices are low, digester technology simply becomes less attractive. Currently, methane prices are at the lowest level they have been since 2000, at around $2.60 per thousand cubic feet. This means that digester technologies produce less income than they would have in 2008, when the natural gas prices were around $7.50 per thousand cubic feet. This means that installing a digester that produces and sells natural gas would bring in less income now than it would have in previous years. For this reason, using the methane produced from digesters for other purposes is often more profitable. With the recent boom in fracking, it is likely that natural gas prices will remain low in the United States. This will cause digesters to continue to be less profitable than they could be. Climate also plays a large role in digester adoption. Anaerobic digesters require a continuously high temperature to work. When the temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius during mesophilic anaerobic digestion, the bacteria do not function efficiently and digestion slows down. Thermophilic digestion requires an even higher minimum temperature of around 55 degrees Celsius. In the upper Midwest, temperatures often fall below 0 degrees Celsius during the winter months. This can slow down the digestive process to a near standstill, leading to no income out of that digester. Also, energy created from the digester may actually have to be recycled back into the digester in order to keep it running in these states, which leads to less income from the digester. For digesters that produce electricity, a major detrimental aspect of working is the fact that the U.S. has lower electrical prices than other countries. Compared to other countries such as Germany, you can clearly see from figure 14 that America's electric prices are low. They're around 10 cents per kilowatt hour. This leads to less income from electric sales than for digesters that produce electricity. Also, when digesters choose to generate and sell electricity, further maintenance and materials are often required. Generating electricity and connecting to the grid are very expensive for digesters. For digesters that produce electricity, 36% of the total capital cost is associated with electrical generation equipment. Also, the majority of yearly maintenance costs relating to digestion come from the upkeep of electrical generation equipment. Gloy and Dissler state that variable operating costs of digesters for a large-scale system are around 4.22 cents per kilowatt hour. This is bad, especially since that is almost about half of what digesters receive from income for selling it back to the market. They also state that it actually might be even harder, Gloy and Dissler also state that it actually might be even harder for small-scale digesters to implement electrical generation technology. At this point, electric companies do subsidize green energy's prices to make it a little easier for digesters to sell their electricity back to the market. However, with the 10% mandate for green energy electricity utility production being met in Michigan and Wisconsin, it is unlikely that electrical companies will increase their subsidies. One electrical company in Michigan, however, named Consumers Energy, has created a new mandate that a further 9% of their total electricity production will be coming from green energy systems such as digesters. This is good for digesters because it opens a whole new market for them in Michigan. So, what's missing? With all this background knowledge, it is easy to see that anaerobic digestion could be a great thing for farmers, but currently there's just too much standing in its way. What we need now is to discover an economically viable way to install anaerobic digesters, especially in these areas with cold climate. There also needs to be an increase in federal funding. However, at this point, with the federal government being in the state it is, this is highly unlikely. We also need to have higher electricity prices in America to help increase electrical reimbursement for digesters that choose to produce electricity. It would be nice to have a stable market economy to help digesters gain footing. States also have to create easier policies and permitting that would help digesters be able to implement on small farmers more. And also, we need to increase farmer opinions of digesters. So, How could we fix this? Well, we could model off Germany and other countries. Germany has a climate that is very similar to the United States. However, they have far more digesters. This is because Germany as a nation has put a huge emphasis on green energy production, especially in the form of biogas production. We also need to think outside the box. We need to identify other sources of green energy that farmers could, of sustainable actions that farmers could implement along with digesters to help create a whole new sustainable system. An example of this would be to build a digester within a greenhouse, just a small digester. The ambient air temperatures in the greenhouse would be much warmer in the winter than they would be outside of the greenhouse, and this would help keep the digester at a warmer, more operable temperature throughout the winter. We also need to identify or develop less expensive materials that reduce the capital cost of the digesters. There also needs to be more research. We need to develop new digester systems that don't exist in the United States yet. We also should develop new uses of digestate from the digester that would help increase profits. Or, lastly, we could develop new strains of methanogens that work more efficiently at colder temperatures. Also, we need to educate farmers. We need to develop new training programs focused on farmers, and we also need to help policymakers understand the role of digesters. This would help them be able to identify and react to overcome digester barriers. And finally, I would like to thank you for your time. Questions will be held after Charles' next presentation, and I now direct you to Charles Gould for the next segment of the webinar.
Okay, am I coming through?
Yep, you're fine.
I made some adjustments.
Yep, you're fine.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk about small digester design and review the case studies that were completed. I want to start first, though, with the big picture. As you can see in this table here, there are 65,000 dairy farms in the United States. And Ben kind of touched on this in his presentation, but 75% plus of those farms have less than 100 cows. If we add in herds with 100 to 199 head, that bumps us up to over 88% of dairy farms in the United States with less than 200 cows. And I think that number is significant because it catches the average herd size of Michigan, Wisconsin, New York, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania. Now think about those states. Those 5 states are not only in the top 10 milk producing states, but they're all cold weather climate states. Now if we add herds between 200 and 499 head, that bumps us up to 95% of the dairy farms in the U.S. having a herd size of less than 500 cows. So what we have here is an untapped market for digester vendors. Yet if you look at what size a farm has digesters, it's not the small and medium-sized farms. In the database of US-based AD systems maintained by AgStar, nearly 90% of the dairy farms with anaerobic digesters are on farms with greater than 500 dairy animals. Now this is a graphic we've seen many times. It illustrates the point that as the number of cows increase, the capital cost of a digester on a per cow basis decreases. Economies of scale favor larger dairies. The average digester cost for dairies in the United States is $1.5 million. That is, again, as Ben pointed out, way beyond the budget of a small dairy. So what I wanted to do is compare the digester cost per cow for the small dairies in our case studies with the digester cost per cow for large dairies. The first 3 farms, as you can see, let's see. Okay, I think I just did something here with my slide, so I'm not going to mess with that. As you can see, in the first 3 dairies, which were part of our case studies, the cost per cow without grants increased as the herd size decreased. However, the cost per cow was substantially reduced with grants. Federal and state grants covered 92% of the capital cost for the Jonesland farm and 96% of the capital cost for the Kuwaitan farm. The exact dollar amount of government grants received by the Bakerview Eco Dairy was not provided. So now let's compare this against the digester cost per cow for large dairies. The number of cows, total project cost, and digester cost per cow are averages extracted from 8 Cornell University case studies authored by Kurt Gooch and others. As you can see, even though the average number of cows and the total project costs are higher than for small dairies, the average digester cost per cow was lower at $1,653. Whoops. If we dig a little deeper to find out what components of a digester system are the most expensive, we find that the digester vessel and energy conservation, the energy conversion technology, are the 2 most expensive components of a digester system. Based on information from the case studies for small farms with digesters, this amounts to about 50% of the total capital cost, and for large farms approximately 76%. Now, I recognize that we have a small population that we're drawing from in arriving at the conclusion, this 50% conclusion, but one of the things that we've discovered in this project is there's just not a whole lot of information out there to draw conclusions from on small farms, so we're amassing this data. Federal and state grants are necessary to get technology from the lab to the farm where it can be further studied and perfected, but the digester industry needs to mature to a point where grants are not needed to have an economically viable project. I propose that if digester vessels are made with less expensive materials and the focus shifts from producing heat to producing heat rather than electricity, then I think that digester projects will become more affordable. An explanation of an inexpensive digester was designed as one of the deliverables of this project and serves to explain this concept. And I'd also point out that someone had typed in about CNG, and I think that is also a very strong, viable option for vehicle gas. So in March of 2012, I traveled to Mexico at the invitation of Alex Eaton, who is the CEO of an NGO called Sistema Barbosa, and I probably massacred the Spanish version of how you say that, but over 1,000 of these Sistema Barbosa digesters have been installed in 8 countries. Sistema Barbosa targets livestock operations in the 30 to 100 head range and provides electrical and mechanical energy production from the biogas. The purpose of this trip was to gain hands-on experience in installing small anaerobic digesters on Mexican farms. It was one of the most intense educational experiences I've ever had in my extension career. I was embedded with Alex's crew as they made farm visits to troubleshoot digesters with problems and to install one digester. All total, I made 11 farm visits over 4 days. I saw firsthand how robust the bladders were. The picture on the top left of Humza standing on a bladder is one example of this. I saw simple functional digesters that produce more than enough biogas to meet the needs of the farmers. I heard numerous farmers say how pleased they were with their digesters. In fact, at a field day I attended, one farmer lamented that he should have purchased more digesters. I came away from that experience convinced that bladder-type digesters could work in Michigan given the right system to address our cold temperatures and dairy production practices. On the first day I was with Alex, he told me, "Don't let the perfect get in the way of the practical." I saw that philosophy woven through the digester systems he developed and installed. his mantra has been in the back of my mind as I have thought about what a small digester system might look like for dairy farms in Wisconsin and Michigan. So let me explain what my thought is here. I've been working with others in designing an inexpensive digester system for a horse farm. Now, I'm sure that you're chuckling to yourself about using horse manure to produce biogas, but there's actually 4 very good reasons why we focused on that. First, horse farms require warm barns to house horses in the winter. You remember that these are, companion animals, and so their well-being is a high priority. Second, warm barns in the winter equals warm manure. Manure going into the digester would not be cold and contain ice crystals. The significance of this is that it takes 1 BTU to raise the temperature of 1 pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit. So if manure has ice in it, for every pound of ice it takes 1,000 BTUs to melt it. A small amount of ice can drastically increase BTU requirements, thus reducing the effectiveness of a digester to produce biogas. Third, horse farms use a lot of hot water for washing horses. And fourth, manure management on horse farms is still primarily done by hand. These reasons made designing a small digester for a horse farm attractive to us. We figured we could make our mistakes on a horse farm and then graduate up to a dairy farm. So the concept is based on inserting a bladder in the top left corner of your screen inside a cargo container. The bladder in the slide is what's called a flexi tank, and it's made by Big Red out of Zeeland, Michigan. Big Red is world renowned for their shipping container bladders. The bladder is made from 2 multi-layer barrier films surrounded by a polyolefin mesh outer layer. The mesh outer layer provides durability and protects the barrier films. The barrier films are made from linear low-density polyethylene and ethyl vinyl alcohol. The barrier films are designed for wine storage as an oxygen and carbon dioxide barrier. Bladders come in 20 and 40 foot lengths. Both easily fit inside a cargo container. Cargo containers are easy to find and they're inexpensive. They provide structure and containment. Cargo containers would need to be insulated and properly vented. Next, we would add hydrogen sulfide and moisture removal technology, all the piping, valves, and pumps necessary for the system. The entry point of the manure is the grinder. Horse manure has to be ground as it is more fibrous. Moisture is added to help it flow. Moisture doesn't have to be water, however. It can be milkhouse wastewater, it could be liquid swine manure, it could be food waste or some other high moisture feedstock. The bladder will need to be heated to maintain mesophilic temperatures, and that can be done with a boiler that uses biogas to provide the heat. So once biogas starts coming, it can be stored in bladders until it's used. Digestate would have to be stored in some kind of below or above ground storage structure until it can be land applied. This system is modular and can be expanded and contracted as needed. So if I assume a 21-day hydraulic retention time and a daily volatile solids loading rate of 0.33 pounds per cubic foot, I'm going to need 3 40-foot bladders or 6 20-foot bladders for a 100-cow milking herd, or 1 40-foot bladder and 2 20-foot bladders for a 38-horse operation. Now, the significance of the 38-horse operation is simply that was going to be a demonstration site for us, and so that was the figures that we were using were based on this 38-horse facility. There's a digester sizing spreadsheet that's on the website where the case studies are located, so you can go back and download that if you feel so inclined. The digester dimensions are 40 feet by 7.66 feet by 3.92 feet. So the only difference between the 40-foot bladder and the 20-foot bladder is just in length. The width and the height are identical. So the estimated cost for the equine digester system described in the previous slide using a 40-foot bladder is $20,000. I don't have an estimated cost for a dairy system, but obviously it would be a little bit more expensive, but we're not talking $1 million. Now, I also recognize that this is an unproven system, but I'm looking to verify this design. So perhaps maybe a more logical thing to do would be to team up with an entity like Sistema Boyabosa, who already have proven tubular digesters such as the one I've just described. All that would be needed to make it functional is to condition it for cold temperatures. Regardless, I welcome anyone who would like to collaborate with me on a project like this to contact me. I believe that increasing digester efficiencies is a way to reduce cost. Scaling up instead of down, using less expensive materials, and designing modular digesters have already been discussed. Digesters with short hydraulic retention times reduce the overall footprint of the digester system and eliminate the need for expensive storage tanks. Focus on biogas as the end product for uses such as vehicle fuel, heating, cooking, and refrigeration rather than electricity production. If there's a need for electricity production, use it to meet specific selected on-farm needs rather than sending it to the grid. Improve digester performance and increase biogas production with high energy feedstocks such as fats, oil, and grease. Food waste and other kinds of feedstocks. Increased biogas production results in increased power output. For example, an increase in the methane content by 5% results in a rise of generated electrical power of about 9%. Receiving high energy feedstocks can be a source of income and generate a profit for the farmer. And I would submit that we don't completely understand methanogenesis either. Are there efficiencies that we can find in manipulating the process of producing biogas? Are there methanogens, meaning the organism itself, that are more efficient in producing methane? Can a digester be developed that selects for these type of methanogens? We look at the potential to have significant impact on reducing natural gas consumption and methane emissions. There's definitely a role for small-scale digesters. The graph on the left shows that small-scale digesters can reduce the natural gas consumption in the United States by 25%. The graph on the right shows that small-scale digesters can reduce methane emissions by 5% per year, and these are not insignificant amounts. So, I'd like to jump from the digester design into the case studies and just share a few things, what we've learned from the case studies. There were 3 case studies, and I have a really sensitive mouse here. There we go. There were 3 digester case studies, small digester case studies that were done to give us a better understanding of the economics associated with installing, operating, and maintaining a digester on a small farm. 2 additional case studies from Wisconsin are pending, and they'll be posted on the website that you logged in on in a short time. As you can see, there are 2 Vermont dairies, 1 British Columbia dairy, and then the 2 Wisconsin dairies. You can also see that they were all small herds. The 2 Avatar digesters are plug flow, and the UAM digester is complete mix. Components of each case study included a description of the farm, a brief overview of the anaerobic digestion system, an explanation of why the farm chose to put in a digester, an in-depth description of the digestion system including diagrams, economics of the system including itemized capital costs, parameters that were tested, time commitments for selected tasks, description of amount received and problems encountered with co-feeds, amount of revenue received from digester, reported problems and failures in specific areas, and lessons learned. And what I'm going to do is share with you some financial data, summary of reported problems and failures, and the lessons learned from these 3 farms. So I'm going to start with Jones Land Farm. The digester at Jones Land Farm performed very well, but their problem was with the genset. The genset went online in August of 2012, but as of August of 2013 had only ran an estimated 4,900 hours. The poor performance was due to an engine that was not properly designed for biogas combustion. A new engine will be installed this winter, or before this winter actually. The generator, though, performed as it was designed to perform, so it was just an engine issue. As you can see from sources of or projected sources of revenue, that 61, almost 62% will come from electric generation, with betting a distant second. At a minimum, the value of electricity produced is equal to the farm's yearly electric bill, which was approximately $50,000. Anything above that is income coming into the farm. There are no carbon credits accumulated or sold. They desire to sell fiber as a source of income, but they want to use all that they produce first for the farm. In terms of operating expenses, if the generator engine was functioning correctly, the annual operating expenses would be very close to what was projected when the project was put together. If everything was running correctly, the annual operating expenses would be approximately 5% more than what was predicted. It should be noted that the genset never ran steady for more than 2 months. The farm has spent a great deal of time trying to keep the genset running. The next farm is Gould. The Gould farm had both digester and genset problems. Unfortunately, the digester has not been in operation long enough to arrive at a reasonable estimation of profit and loss. Because the digester did not reach consistent operation until the summer of this year, it is difficult to determine the true value of energy produced. However, a window into that value might be provided from January through August of 2013 of this year. Based on power company records given to the farmer, the gross value of the electricity produced was $4,178, and the net value after subtracting parasitic load was $3,182. The operating costs were much higher than projected because of the costly repairs. I do want to point out, however, that the digester vendor has covered the majority of the cost of those repairs, and they continued to service the digester and the genset. In this particular situation, I should point out that the genset manufacturer has gone out of business, and so the digester vendor is picking up the cost of maintaining that genset. The third case study is Bakerview Eco Dairy. They're located on the edge of an urban area near Abbotsford, British Columbia. The farm is both a fully functioning dairy operation and a demonstration farm, which is designed to showcase the latest advancement in dairy industry technology. Construction on the Bakerview system began in November of 2010 and was completed in January of 2011. Biogas production was first documented in April of 2011. The digester was assembled in an existing calf barn and was retrofitted to house the new system. The primary use of the biogas is for electricity production. Generally, the system produces about 12 kilowatts per hour based on a 14-hour per day run time. Ongoing challenges have made it difficult to assess long-term operational requirements, as the system has yet to operate as a stable system for any length of time, and that was greater than the length of time is greater than 6 months. The operational challenges that they have faced are related to interconnection, combined heat and power unit, digester mixing and solid liquid the solid liquid separator. It's important to note again in this case that the digester vendor is providing ongoing support for the digester system. Now, we really don't have some good information here. The best that we could come up with was from a period of June 1st of 2011 to December 1st of 2012, which is about an 18-month period of time. There was a net annual cash flow of $3,480, and this information was only provided because there was a meter that allowed that information to be extracted. So I want to move from the financial aspect here to the case studies here, and what I'm going to do is there were 5 let's see here, sorry about that. Okay, I'm running out of time here, and we want to make sure we answer some questions, and so I'm going to skip this part and just encourage you to go to the case studies and take a look at the case studies for this particular information. There were some great lessons that were learned, and I'm just going to focus on 2 of them. If you go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th bullet point, all the farmers said that farmers should be involved in the design of the digesters. There were things that could have been changed that would have saved both the farmer and the digester vendor money, and they said again resoundingly that the digester vendors need to talk among themselves and share information, because we saw the same mistakes repeated over and over again. So I've got just one more slide here. In terms of project summary, we sought to understand what is needed to make small digesters part of the rural economic engine in Michigan and Wisconsin. And what we discovered is what we thought we'd find, that there's limited information out there due to the lack of small digesters in the United States. The literature review that Ben talked about asserts that designing less expensive digester systems and adopting policies that are favorable to small digester implementation are 2 factors that would spur building more digesters on small dairy farms. It was pointed out that there's a great need for more applied and basic research, as well as targeted farmer education programs. Specific research and education suggestions were offered that would increase the number of digesters on small farms in Wisconsin and Michigan. What we've learned from the case study supports the conclusions of the literature review. Additionally, we learned that farmers still feel positive about digesters, notwithstanding the problems that they've had producing biogas and generating electricity. And this is significant because their experience is going to convince or discourage other dairy farmers to install digesters. And I think that the potential to make a profit is there if the digester and genset problems are eliminated or greatly reduced. I just encourage you to go to the website and read the case studies and the literature review. There's a great deal of information there that was not shared in the presentations you've heard this morning. I just remind you that the 2 Wisconsin case studies are also going to be posted shortly. Want to again acknowledge and thank the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development for funding this project, and thank you for your time, and we'll answer questions now. And if you have any questions that aren't answered,
yeah, and there were a couple
then
questions
please
that came in
contact
on the
me.
chat here. One person, Larry, wanted to know about what's parasitic load, and then there was a
Okay, the parasitic load is the load that's necessary to run the digester. So you have a certain minimum amount of energy that it takes to run the digester that you got to take care of in order for it to function. So anything above that is that's where your profit
Okay,
comes
and then
from.
there was a question early on from Jim Rezick asking, and folks, please go ahead and fill out the evaluation that you see in front of you there. Converting to compressed natural gas, and I think there was also a similar question from Chris Duke about conversion to CNG and connecting to the gas grid and those kinds of considerations. Any response to that?
Yeah, I think that farmers would really bite on converting biogas into natural gas. In other words, 96% pure methane. If the technology was cheap enough, that's I haven't, and those of you on the webinar here, if you know of technology that's inexpensive that would remove hydrogen sulfide and other impurities from the biogas and then compress it into a vehicle fuel, man, I want to hear. I'd really like to know, because I think that's what's going to really attract farmers to put in digesters.
What about the nature, the digest
I think in
state?
terms of,
Is it wet or dry?
go ahead, Scott, I'm sorry. Yeah, digestate coming out is about, it is wet, and when it goes through the solid separator, it gets down to about 60%
And
moisture.
then Chipolai is looking at digesters as a mitigation technology for livestock methane in response to greenhouse gas regulation by EPA. Any response to that?
Yep, it's definitely a method that works, a technology that works, and that's why if we can really have an impact on that if we can reduce the cost of digesters such that small farms can afford to put them in.
And then a couple comments from Chris Duke. Needs to be done at scale. The conversion costs are expensive. Needs to be about 1 to 2 megawatt electrical equivalent in size. Any comment about that?
Yeah, see, that's why we've got to find the technology that's inexpensive enough for these small farmers to use to implement as part of their system.
Larry wanted to know
And I
about
don't think
compressing
we're there
methane, and is it dangerous?
Well, there's, yes, I guess if it's done wrong, but the technology is a rather mature technology, and we rarely hear about incidences in the news. So I guess I can't really speak authoritatively about that, but I would just assume that it wouldn't, as
Okay.
long as protocols are followed.
Well, if others have questions, feel free to put them into the chat box. I want to thank our presenters for a very comprehensive view of this, and I think the materials that support this, as Charles mentioned, are posted there right with the webinar on the archive website, which is, you can see that down here at the bottom on the webinar. Notes is the address where you can find those. So and there are people typing, so I think we'll hang on the line here for a little bit. see what else comes in.
Okay, all right. Howard said that he was at Bakerview in July, had the understanding it was larger than needed for the 44 cows. Dana, could you comment on that? Dana was also out there, and I think you're correct, but perhaps Dana could just verify that.
Trying to rearrange this so people can see your address as well as the there. Okay, so you don't have to submit when you're done with the evaluation, as long as you see the box checked or not, depending on what your feeling is, then you're done. It's registered. So that was Chris Duke's question.
Yeah, and I'm up for further discussion on this, folks. Call me or send me an email. I'm real passionate about this and would like to see us do more for these small dairy
All right.
farms.
Well, it doesn't look like there's more questions coming in. We had a good dialogue here today, and I want to thank both of you for joining us. And Rosa, you can